Yes, I had a blood vessel pop in my eyeball. Surprisingly, it's not that big of a deal. I didn't even know that it happened when it happened, and I don't notice anything from my point of view right now. Like, vision is fine. But I realized that the equivalent of a bruise happening in the eyeball is an extremely scary and ugly looking thing, but I still want to record these videos. It'll go away in the next couple weeks, so just try to ignore it and don't judge me. So in the AI news this week, we're going to talk about Stephen Wolfram and his thoughts on what it will actually be like when we think 1,000 times faster than we do today, thanks to things like Neuralink. Sam Altman asked Scarlett Johansson if she would be the voice of one of the ChatGPT voices. She said no. He did it anyways, and now lawyers are involved. Oops. Apple patents some stuff that might make it into a future version of AirBuds that will collect way more information from your ear canal than I ever thought was possible. The humanoid robot now actually has a price tag, so you can do this at home for only $16,000. Maybe the future is going to be more like Westworld than I thought. Smosh is tackling some of the more nuanced aspects of AI dating. Dino 1.5 Pro has been released, making it the most capable model yet for object detection. Apple's AI-powered eye tracking feature might be low-key one of the most impressive AI things I've ever seen. Although I wonder if this blood vessel thing might throw it off. Might be like, you only have one eye. Meta's new model Chameleon should be their equivalent of what we've seen with Astra and GPT-4o. And AI has outperformed humans in, get this, a theory of mind test. But first, before we get into it, let's check Alan's conservative countdown to AGI to see how much time we have left. 74%. Okay, so the GPT-4o update is still the last one, so... All right, man, we're closing in on 3/4. All right, so first let's talk about this fascinating interview with Stephen Wolfram. Now, he is one of the smartest people on the planet. I love listening to podcasts, and when he started talking about what it might feel like to be 100 times faster in the way that we think, and how that will change basically our reality, our perception of everything we interact with, I felt like I had to share it.
You know, what would it be like to talk to an entity that was thinking 1,000,000 times faster than you were? I don't know.
So a couple things to focus on here. One is we got to get our mind around what something like a GPT-7 might actually be like if it starts developing its own theory of mind, interacting with us, but it's so much faster than us.
It's like perceiving something in physics, for example, where, you know, lots of things are happening, but all we're perceiving is what we're capable of perceiving.
The other aspect is, what if we're slowly upgrading our brain through something like Neuralink, just piece by piece by piece, and as each component comes together, we eventually get that full speed all the way through our head?
What if we gradually replace our neural circuitry with digital electronics, so we think 1,000,000 times faster? What would that feel like? You know, our experience of the physical world will be different in that case. You know, we'll notice the individual photons coming in. We'll, you know, not aggregate space in the same way. We'll have all kinds of other funky relationships, different relationships to physics.
So for this next thought experiment, just imagine that, say you have a thought that takes 15 seconds, right? But imagine that you got 1,000,000 thoughts in that same period of time. So whatever it is, reviewing your to-do list, thinking about your relationships with everybody, TV shows you like, whatever. But 15 seconds from now, you've gone through 1,000,000 thoughts. So you've evolved and simulated and done so much more than in this moment. Well, that would be one way that it might play out. But another one could be like Steven saying, what if it's still one thought, but you went 1,000,000 times deeper into the details? Like, instead of just seeing water is wet, what if you actually see all of the individual atoms, all the molecules bouncing around, and you just still feel the same thing? Like, you still feel like your hand is wet if you dip it in a bowl of water or something, but you don't just think of it on that level. You also see it as individual atoms, and you could answer any questions about them individually, but it's still the same experience.
The things that would take me a year to work out, the 1,000,000 times faster me would work out in 30 seconds.
Like, you'll never walk away from a date being like, that was stupid, or like you're never nervous about something because you have so much time to comprehend it. Like, I would imagine it would be sort of like the Flash in the superhero movies, where time just seems like it's slowing down around the person because they can observe more of it if they want to. But then I would also say, what would the world even be like? We talk about how fast it's changing now with exponential change, but it's not just as fast as the world can go now. If every individual person is thinking 1,000,000 times faster and we all have 1,000,000 times better ideas, with the ability to search the internet or refine our thoughts outside of our own head, then God knows what it'll even be like to talk to anyone, or what it'll be like to imagine anything. Like, the universe might just completely look different. The nature of work, the nature of relationships, it seems like it would all be so different at that point. So throw some comments down below if you can imagine what might be different about thinking 100, 1,000, or 1,000,000 times faster. Next up, let's talk about Sam Altman's approach on Scarlett Johansson. Took place 9 months ago. Now listen, for a lot of us, approaching Scarlett Johansson probably isn't easy, but Sam Altman, he had a game plan. He walked up and said, hey, I'd like to give you probably bucket loads of money for your voice. I'm a billionaire, ChatGPT, you heard of me? Turns out she had, and she thought about it, and she didn't want to do it. So Sam Altman, OpenAI, move along, and one voice named Sky sounds familiar.
I'm really excited about teaming up with you, and I'm all set to dive in. So how can I make your life easier?
See, it doesn't sound very Scarlett Johansson-y to me.
Well, me neither, Tim. I thought the same thing. I had chosen Sky as my voice months ago when I first downloaded the app. I do like the voice. I never once thought this was meant to be the same voice from the movie Her. They never once marketed it as the voice of her or Scarlett Johansson as an individual. I never thought it was so close that it was representing her in any way. That's funny. I mean that in both senses. Like, it wasn't representing her as in the movie and her as in Scarlett Johansson in any way. But at least according to my poll, it seems like about 41% of you actually had that thought before the lawsuit. But maybe I should have asked, like, did you actually think it was her? Because if you thought it sounded like her, but it wasn't, I feel like that doesn't count. Like, you can't sue someone for sounding like you. It's got to be like so much like you that it's causing damage. But Scarlett went on record and she said, last September, I received an offer from Sam Altman, who wanted to hire me to voice their current ChatGPT 4.0 system. I would love to know what that price was, because I bet her lawyers could have asked for anything and he would have paid it.
500 million a year or 5 billion or 50 billion a year. I don't care. I genuinely don't.
There's no way that guy's not crushing on her, just a little bit. All right, so another conversation of where to draw the line. Apple has submitted a patent that raises some serious privacy and ethical concerns. So I didn't really even think about how possible it is to stick something in your ear like we do with a headphone and then have it measure all sorts of fairly intimate parts of your body. I mean, I've been to the doctor and they've taken my temperature by sticking a thing in my ear, but I just forgot that you can do EOGs, ECGs, EEGs, EMGs, GSRs, and BPVs. A lot of that stuff I can't even pronounce, but I see brainwaves in there, so I'm already like, whoa. I don't know if you need to be reading my brainwaves from my AirPods, you know? And Apple might be like, well, once we know your brainwaves, we can like adjust the volume so that it sounds perfect to your brain. And I'll be like, well, what about all the other stuff you're getting? Right, and I also get that at this point it's just a patent, and like, why not just go broad? It doesn't necessarily mean they're going to build it, and they're not trying to push this down our throats. That would be a different story, but it's a hint into the world that we're going to get into that I just hadn't really thought too much about. I'm already concerned. I've already given up on it. I know that someday in our future, we are going to have systems that can read our brain waves. Like, it's just going to happen. But somehow it's been easier for me to kind of dismiss the risks or the parts of that world I don't like because they just seemed a little far off and not very concrete. And I guess seeing a patent like this, I'm like, oh yeah, like I can kind of imagine how this gets built. I can imagine how you keep tuning AI models, and then I can see how that makes its way into a product like in the next few years. And speaking of uncomfortable thoughts, check this out. It's a robot that can now walk around your house and, I guess, protect you / destroy you? Hi, Mr. Unitree. Could you get up off the ground? Oh, thank you. I was hoping you'd go back to work and do my laundry. Excuse me, Mr. Unitree. I feel like kicking and boxing someone. Do you mind standing in for the person? Help me get my aggression out. Oh, I'd be happy to, sir. May I take another punch to the chest? Unitree, feel free. Relax on the couch for a little bit. Please grab my staff. I feel like some sword play today. And when you're done with your weapons training, please fetch me some breakfast, would ya? Smash some walnuts, open a Coke, and while you're killing time, please hammer your own finger? So Smosh did a really funny skit talking about artificial intelligent dating apps.
Percent of all dating app conversations are soured when a woman receives an unsolicited penis picture. But Love AI uses machine learning to fix that. Unbeknownst to the sender, the recipient will receive an AI-generated photo that perfectly fits their interests.
I've thought about that. I mean, I haven't thought about that, but I've thought about how if you send a message and AI cleans it, even spell correct is kind of there. But especially if there's another agent that's helping you like write something, or even your friends are helping you write something, and then her friends are helping her write something, like you're not really talking. You're not really getting to know each other. You're kind of getting to know the group dynamic or the educated answers to things that include some not instinctive reaction, you know. But as machine learning adds more and more layers to that, it can just manipulate the photo. You're just like, psh, here's an ugly photo of me on my bed, and it's like, here's me at Disneyland, I love vacationing, and like that's not anything by like what that moment really was. So when they saw that part, I was like, it's kind of hilarious, you know. You could imagine that being helpful to some guys. All right, so let's talk about these Dino models. They have been really popular because they're object identification models. So what's interesting about this model is that if you ask for something, it can find it in video. Okay, so in this video, they're saying find a person, a boat engine, and horse. So not only can it find the nested boat and boat engine, it's able to see the horses. That's crazy because they don't make sense in the picture, but it just knows because it's just machine vision. Submarine and a person, a giant butterfly. Where are they getting these videos from? This is like not the kind of videos I expected them to be looking at. Car, house, trunk, motor. Here you can see a bunch of dinosaurs, or at least people dressed like dinosaurs. Biscuits. Oh my gosh, every biscuit accounted for, every box accounted for. Imagine Amazon warehouse, or a fish supply company, or a guinea pig farm factory of friends. And bird watching, whale watching, spying on all of us. Looking at a crowd at EDC, who's on drugs. Now we know even more precisely than before, thanks to the newest model, Dino 1.5. Okay, next up I want to talk about Apple's eye tracking technology. So this was kind of underwhelming, I guess, for a lot of people. It was just one of those, you know, important but not like really talked about accessibility features that was added in the newest iOS. So in fact, the reason I find this so interesting is I find this to be one of the most useful tools on my computer. I have a shortcut that makes all of these different links accessible with like a 2 keyboard like choice, right? So if I want to subscribe to the channel, I just hit JW and boom, I'm subscribed. But I don't really want to subscribe. So before that goes up, I hit JP and now I do it again, and now WJ, and I'm unsubscribed. Wait, actually, I'm still not there. EC, now I'm unsubscribed. I'm sorry, I just don't know if I can subscribe to Columbus_TBK. Nothing wrong with you, I'm just saying. The mouse was just where I looked. That would be ultimate. And then I could keep my hand on the keyboard and just hit something the equivalent of click. I don't think I'd want blinking to be click, because then I would be like so scared I'd be clicking all the time. Maybe double blink, but I think something in my hand is fine for that. But still, just navigating around would be so fast because I'm always finding what I want with my eyes long before I like get to my mouse and click on it. But it's more than accessibility too, because it got me thinking, how should we be designing apps and the internet to cater to agents? Like when you have a future version of ChatGPT desktop that is watching your desktop the same way you are, and you say, go to Amazon and like buy me some more soap, and it goes to Amazon and it's logged into your browser and it like pulls up soap and puts it in your cart and then puts it on your credit card, and the whole thing is taken care of, and you're maybe supervising or watching what it's watching. Pretty fascinating. Or if you get scared, like, whoa, that's not the soap I'd want. Like maybe it's seeing your face and it's like, oh, I better stop. Like, am I doing something wrong here, or is this what you were requesting? So yeah, maybe that's one of those things. Like if you're really an entrepreneur right now, or you work at a company and you want to do something really innovative, maybe start thinking about how should we be designing tools or apps, websites, interfaces, UX in general to cater to agents that represent people, because we haven't really started building stuff specifically for that. And I used to think it was API related. Like I was like, oh, they'll just write the code and talk to the API and do all of that. But no, they're probably going to be the same form factor as us, just the same way we're building humanoid robots that are just going to pick things up with robotic hands instead of like designing better systems that might be more efficient, but they weren't essentially replacing what humans do. I think most of these interfaces will work because they're just going to be copying what we're doing. It was food for thought. So Meta has dropped a new model called Chameleon AI, and it is meant to compete with some of these awesome new multimodal systems that we've seen on mobile, right? So the GPT-4o and then Google's Astra project, which are very interesting use cases for a multimodal system. But there's a big asterisk to this because this model is new, but what it really is it's a signal to the market that, hey, don't forget about Meta, because in maybe a couple months from now, a few months from now, you're going to see something similar, and there's a good chance that they're going to open source what they're working on. So what this new model technically is a model that's 5 months old. It's only a 34 billion parameter model, so it's much smaller than the trillion plus that GPT-4 is probably dealing with. But what I think Jan LeCun is saying with this model is like, guys, like we built something just like this. We're like aware of how powerful these multimodal models will be in the long run. And we built something to make sure that we can scale it up and put trillions of parameters on it. There's no glass ceiling, that we can dump all our data in it, that we know how it works with our GPU clusters, and then we're going to scale it. So they beat us to it, but coming soon. But just like what we saw out of Astra and GPT-4o, this is a multimodal model that processes text and images in a unified token space and can reason and generate seamlessly across modalities. Basically, you can talk to it, you can speak to it, you can use video, you can just interact with it in a much more human way. All right, now one of the things that generally separates the humans from the LLMs is a consciousness, a theory of mind, the ability to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, to understand that other people exist out in the world and they think differently than you. But now there's some new research that says that AI outperforms human in theory of mind test. Large language models convincingly mimic and understand human mental states. Okay, there's so much to unpack in this, because for some of us, we just look at what large language models are doing and we say, okay, that's mimicking theory of mind a little bit, but it's just next token prediction. There's not like a world model. There's not a simulation. There's not a sense of self. It's not conscious. It's not really doing theory of mind. Setting aside that question, let's assume this model is just mimicking. Still, it doesn't mimic theory of mind very well, you would think. And that's exactly what the co-author of this study said. Before running the study, we were all convinced that large language models would not pass these tests, especially tests that evaluate subtle abilities to evaluate mental states. But goes on to say that the results are, quote, unexpected and surprising. All right, so nothing here is going to prove that these models have a theory of mind, but we are going to prove that they're better at mimicking it than a lot of people thought. So let me take you back to some research that goes before this, just so we can set the stage for you. Okay, so a Stanford psychologist reported testing several models on a few common theory of mind tests, and he found that the best of them, which was OpenAI's GPT-4, solved 75% of the tasks correctly, which he said matched the performance of a 6-year-old child. Okay, but there was a lot of criticism of the methods used. Some said that it did good because it had shallow heuristics that it could like lean on, and it wasn't really doing it the right way. So it was using these shortcuts rather than any kind of real theory of mind reasoning. Okay, so they were aware of this. So in their study, they went at it with a much more systematic way of using a breadth of different psychological tests. You know, the most interesting of these tests is called the false belief test. And these are the ideas that you and another person are in a room. You see some situation like an object going in a box. That person leaves the room. The object moves from one box to another. And then when that person comes in the room, you know that they know the old situation, not the extra information you've seen. So if you have a real theory of mind, you'll think to yourself, oh, I know what it's like to be in their shoes. And they're going to see something that they thought previously is still in the first box, but they won't know what I know. But if you're young, like you're a child, you'll be like, oh, it's in the other box. They probably know that because they're the adult. They know everything. You don't quite understand that like you're different and you're holding that person's mental state separately. And here's where things get kind of incredible. GPT-4 came out on top. Its scores matched those of humans for the false belief test. What? And then on top of that, there was other things they were testing them on. They were higher than aggregated human scores for irony, hinting, and strange stories. I mean, I guess it doesn't have theory of mind. Like, I get it. It's just next token prediction. It's just a machine. But that's some next level just depth to the answers that you wouldn't expect. So the first paper we're going to be looking at is called Orbit Surgical, an open simulation framework for learning surgical augmented dexterity. Okay, so this thing called Orbit Surgical is like a whole simulator of surgical stuff. It's all built on that NVIDIA Omniverse stuff that we covered, actually probably like over a month now at the big NVIDIA conference. So basically they took a bunch of common surgical training scenarios and started to simulate them in this environment where it could use reinforcement learning to get better and better, and imitation learning to get better and better. And look at it sticking the tube in the little hole or whatever. I guess it's simulating like a little artery going in there. Here, the two hands are putting a needle through this circle, grabbing these little blocks, moving them around. And what's crazy is here they're bringing in, so here they're actually building the original digital twin. And instead of just using photos, it's like, yeah, use like full spectrum, like beyond what the human eye can see, use all sorts of other depth sensors, like make the digital twin better by using every kind of sensor you can.
The middle video shows a trained model to insert a deformable shunt into a vessel phantom.
A shunt into a phantom? Incredible. Okay, next up we have Glyph by T5, a customized text encoder for accurate visual text rendering. So what they're experimenting with here is a text encoder. Like you're trying to make text look good when you generate it on an image. Big problem in generative models. And they go into some detail into what other models actually get wrong when generating text, which was kind of like I always knew it looked wrong, but I never really thought about like what it's doing wrong. So this thing, Glyph by T5, is a customized text encoder that's built by fine-tuning the model with a paired glyph text data set. And the new encoder has the goal to align text with visual glyphs. Yeah, like it's probably not a great comparison, but when you think about the RAG models, the new retrieval augmented generation things that everybody's talking about, where you go to like a more curated data set and then you grab some real facts and put them in the prompt with the kind of creative stuff so that it feels more real. It's kind of like that. You're diffusing models, but when you ask for text, it does kind of know what real text looks like. And their research improves text rendering accuracy and design images from less than 20% to nearly 90%. Yeah, and to me, this looks really nice. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times, it was the age of foolishness. So this one, so I was looking at this and it's right. I mean, the spacing still feels a little weird, but at least Trick or Treat, it decided to keep the same basic font and font color for what you would think of as a title. You picked its own sort of color for Candy's costume party and games. And then where the address goes, it looks pretty handwritten. In fact, in some ways, I kind of like that a diffusion model like this actually could do handwriting in a way that wouldn't look like Comic Sans or something. Because if it's handwritten but a font, you still see that every G is exactly the same, you know? It is kind of cool that every letter would have a certain uniqueness like a handwritten. You got this squirrel over here, a customized text encoder for accurate visual text rendering. There you go. Okay, the next research paper we're going to talk about is called Naturalistic Music Decoding from EEG Data via Latent Diffusion Models. So this paper is about a diffusion model that can decode naturalistic music from EEG. And the goal is to reconstruct high-quality music directly from brainwaves without any invasive technology or extensive pre-processing. So this is a model that goes from brainwaves to music. Like what? And it's focused on detail-oriented, like multi-instrument music on top of that. Or you don't even need to go into the brain to read this. So the researchers trained their models with a comprehensive data set of basically people listening to music, and then they trained the model on that, and then they tested it with new metrics to prove that they can effectively create music that sounds very close to the actual songs that the human brain is listening to or imagining. This is the world we're living in right now. Like, this is not sci-fi. I mean, I don't know how well it works, but I'm just saying, like, this is going to work as time gets better. It will eventually work so well it will be productized, is what I mean. And that people will just, oh, I've got this cool new app. Look, I can see what you're thinking right now and probably hear what song's playing in your head and probably eventually exactly what words you're saying in your head. But I guess in the less dystopian way, the product would actually just let you imagine music and it would be recorded. You could sing in your head all of the keys that you vocally might not be able to do. You can imagine instruments, you can just imagine music and like share it directly with people. So maybe a future like big EDC rave like we just had here in Las Vegas will just be a guy or girl standing there with this thing on their head and they're just gonna imagine the music right there and everyone will just dance to it. Just like, you know, like that will actually become the real music. And I want to talk about this article too called AI and the Problem of Scale. This was written by Benedict Evans. He does a great email that I'm subscribed to, just like about cool tech stuff. So yeah, this kind of summarizes it well. Like sometimes a change in scale is a change in principle. There are things that have been problems, like deepfakes, for example. Like there has always been Photoshop, or at least for the last couple of decades, where people could work really hard to make an image look fake, or maybe fake a video, or hire an actor, like. And it was a little problem that didn't impact us too much and generally was controllable. But when anyone can do it and it's really, really convincing it's now a different problem. So in some ways, it's not really about these tools doing something we haven't seen before. And that's why when we build them and not many people use them, and a couple of journalists just like cover like, wow, you can now make deepfakes really easily on your computer. People are like, oh, it's not probably too big of a deal, but it's just not at scale. But nobody's thinking in scale really. And he goes further to talk about how there's like certain surveillance methods that, okay, like if the CIA wanted to follow somebody or surveil them, they had to pick a target. It takes manpower, it takes money. But if the CIA can be like, oh, maybe I'll just track everyone that way in the whole country, the whole world, well, then it's very different. Like an automated system that sees a car drive past it and it sees that they're speeding and it takes a photo of the license plate and sends them a bill, right? That's kind of a specific use case for looking someone up in the database. But maybe it's a little bit different if a networked system just knows where every license plate and every car is all the time and starts developing patterns of where they drive and why they drive places and expectations and predictions, even if it is technically just more cameras looking at more license plates like before. So yeah, it's something to think about as we move forward into a new future of artificial intelligence together. We'll see you guys in the next video.